With this brand new little gadget, I can apparently turn my Fat Shark receiver module into an FPV base station. But is it any good? Let's take a look. Hi, I'm Ash from DroningON, and FuriousFPV have very kindly sent us their brand new Dock King product for review. I've got to say that very carefully. With this new product, you basically take your receiver module from your Fat Shark FPV goggles and insert it into this, mount this on a tripod, and it then becomes an FPV ground station. But is it any good? Well, let's unbox it, take a look, and test it out. So the makers of the awesome TrueD module for Fat Shark goggles have just made something even better, and it's called the Dock King. Got to say that very carefully, and whatever you do, do not Google docking, because I've never even heard of this practice that came up in the Google search. Anyway, it's packaged very, very nicely. Let's unwrap this and have a look. So if you're unsure what this is, it's basically a ground station. And the biggest problem when you're flying FPV is the kind of, you can't help it, but you end up looking down. And of course the issue with that is that your antennas end up not pointing upwards, and that means bad signals. So the benefit of a ground station is that you can position your antennas in advance, pointing into the kind of area or the signal width area that you'll be flying in, and it means you're going to get overall a better signal. But this is not just a ground station, it does a whole lot more. So the first thing we see is this lovely little introductory piece, and this just gives you an idea of every feature that this has, which is really impressive. Not only do you get the OSD on most of your models these days, but this has its own inbuilt configurable OSD, which obviously is going to give you far more about your signal strength than your onboard quad ever probably could. We've got lots of things built in, 2 AV outputs, we've got external outputs for DVR and HDMI as well, improved image quality, and that's through an algorithm enhancement that this has over just using the basic TrueD module. We've got an inbuilt buzzer in here as well, so it can give you low battery warnings, also low RSSI warnings, and even cooler is that you can configure this dock via Bluetooth and a specialist app for iOS or Android. So it's got loads of features, and yeah, also buttons on the outside. We'll have a look at that in a minute. So the actual module itself is in here. First of all, we get a battery strap. Thank you very much, FuriousFPV. We got some beautiful ribboned cables here. Now, quality is easily lost through a cheap low-grade cable, and so it's really nice to see that we've got these really good quality feeling audio and visual cables here. So these are what we're going to use to be connecting our goggles into the actual dock itself. So well done FuriousFPV for not budgeting and scrimping on low grade quality cables. Then we've got a cable adapter here as well. So this is nice. You're not going to have to use your normal goggle batteries if you don't want to. Instead, you can provide power via a XT60 connector and a regular battery, such as these little 1300 packs here. Or of course, if you're flying all day, use an even bigger pack and you're not going to need to change that battery. And then finally the module, which is the last thing we're going to pull out there, and there it is. So we've got this. From the front it looks a bit boring, but that's because of course the FuriousFPV TrueD module sits on top of it. So we'll do that in a second, but first of all we'll just inspect what this module looks like around the sides. So on the underside we've got an inbuilt tripod mount, which is lovely. It means that we've got full control over the way and direction and height, etc., at which we mount our docking station. So nice thinking there. On the side we've got an on and off button. Big complaint or big wish list feature for a lot of people flying FPV is to have an on and off button on their goggles. Well, this essentially gives you that. It means you can turn the receiver component on and off. External port, not really too sure about that. Maybe that's for future configuration, but the manual doesn't seem to explain what that's for. Then on this side we've got HDMI and DVR outputs. Now these are not conventional plugs. You won't be able to plug a mini HDMI straight into that. It's going to need some sort of adapter, and that's sold separately it seems. Turning it around, we've now got our 2 AV outputs. So one of these of course is going to be going into your goggles, and then the other is optional. That can go into perhaps another set of goggles if you want to give a passenger ride. And then we've got our power input. So as mentioned, you plug the little adapter cable that came with it into there. and then you can plug your XT60 into the other side. Alternatively, of course, you can just plug a regular goggle battery in there, but it's worth noting, as it says, it does take a 2S up to a 4S battery, so that's really nice and flexible. Then on the other side, we've got what feels to be a little joystick and a pressable button, and then a set of LEDs here. So this does, of course, support the diversity of the TrueD module, and these LEDs apparently light up to show you the signal strength of each of those antennas. So that's really nice as well, that you don't have to put your goggles on to see what sort of signal strength you're getting. So that's the module. It's nice and compact. It feels very well made as well. It doesn't feel cheap and tacky. Let's get our TrueD module installed into the front of it next. So I've now removed the module from my goggles. As I said during the review of this module, be very careful with these tiny little delicate pins when you remove and install this into your goggles. If you do snap one of these pins, you're going to be in trouble, and they are easy to bend, so be very, very careful. Installation into the Dock King, saying that very carefully, is just as per the goggles. Align them up very, very carefully, and when you're sure that they're all lined up fully, push the module in firmly and it clicks in place. And now this really does look like a finished product, and yeah, really, really nice. Now this is ready to be mounted on top of our tripod and ready to go. So on a beautiful summer's day like this, what more could you want than a nice Thatcher's Haze, which is a local cider brewed literally about half an hour from where I live. Really awesome and lovely stuff. Anyway, back to business. So we've got the Dock King here, and what we're going to be doing is testing it. Not exactly going to be a scientific test. I am not Joshua Bardwell, but we're going to rig it up and see for the amateur FPV like me how much of a benefit this little unit is. So first thing we're going to do is attach it onto my tripod mount. And that goes on like that. Now I love the fact that this has an inbuilt tripod mount, and the reason is because it's just going to make this so much easier. So I've got my tripod with me here, and the great thing about it is I can angle it in any direction that I want. And what I'm going to be doing is focusing on aiming probably over there towards where that hot air balloon is. And we're going to do a bit of a range test, and just also around these trees here. So I'll point it over there as well, and we'll see how it fares going through trees. So I'm going to first of all position it like that, tighten that up. Got our diversity lights here as well, so we can see the signal strength on each antenna. On and off switch as well, of course, which is really cool. And power, so I'm going to put a battery into it. Now you can power it via that cable it comes with. Oh, I've packed it away. So you can connect it to a regular 3 or 4S LiPo battery, but I'm just going to use this pack for now. Let's just check we've got power. Yep, we've got a light there, all working, and it beeps as well, so that's good. Now I've not got the module attached to it just yet, because what I'm going to do first is do a quick test flight with the module attached to the goggles as usual. So I've got my beautiful Menace Pico patch antenna and my Triumph there as well. I'm going to be using the same antennas when I hook this TrueD module up to the Dock King. Still very careful on how I pronounce that. So the first test, which I'm going to do now, is to put these goggles on, fly the quad over there and around the trees and back, and probably just do that a few times using the standard goggle configuration. I'll be doing as I normally do when I'm flying with goggles on, doing my best to keep my head upright and looking in the right direction. And then we'll do the same test with the Dock King. So let's take off right now. So as mentioned, we're going to head over to these trees, try and do the same circuit, and let's see what kind of interference we get. Do the same route. So this is without the docking, remember. So not loads of breakup, actually quite a clean signal there. I'm going to do that a few times, so same again. Around these trees. Down, around that one, and back again. And then back towards me. So not loads of interference. As I said, I'm doing my best to keep my head up, to simulate, you know, how we just generally be flying, trying to keep our antennas nice and vertical. Same again. Back. So that's a few laps of that. Not loads of breakup, but there is a bit of breakup. So let's now hook up the docking and see if that gives us better reception. So it's now pointing in roughly the direction that we're flying, which is around these trees. Let's just check. Nice and level, yep, and it's pointing in exactly that position. Now obviously the patch gives us a little bit of spread, so that should cover that entire area. The omnidirectional obviously is omnidirectional. So same test again, 25 milliwatts, and we'll see what sort of signal we get in the trees. So we're going to do exactly the same route again, and that will allow us to compare the two for signal. This isn't a great test, I guess, and as I said, it's anything but scientific, but it's just to give us an idea from the FPV noob how much of a difference this actually would make to our flying experience. So, I don't know whether it's my imagination, but the picture looks better. But right now in this review, you're hopefully seeing them both side by side, so you can actually get a much better idea of that. But the actual quality of the picture, I don't mean the signal, it might just be my imagination. In terms of breakup, we're hardly getting any. There's a bit, but nothing significant. You can see me sat on the floor there looking like an idiot. But it's just, I must say, the nicest thing is the fact that I can actually relax and enjoy this flying. I'm not having to worry about where my head is pointing, where the antennas are pointing, because the antennas are no longer on my head, so I can just relax. Now I'm actually a bit low on battery, so I'm going to do one more lap, but this has been a good enough test. One more lap of the trees, and then come back, and then we're going to do the range test. So yeah, I mean, the reviews I've seen of the Dock King have all commented on how much better this gives signal, etc. But it could also be a little bit of my imagination, but certainly the relief of not having to keep it pointed towards where the quad's flying all the time is such a refreshing change. Anyway, on to the range test. I'm going to stick a new battery in and we'll give that a go now. So now the range test, and as I mentioned, I am doing my best to face in the approximate direction of where the quad's heading. Now we're on 25 milliwatts, so not a strong power, and we're getting incredible range. Still going. Almost at the end of the field now, and still hardly any breakup there. Starting to get a little bit wishy-washy now. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. I'm actually going to turn around at this point. But yeah, you can see we're getting a bit of breakup there actually. So now I'm going to head back. So probably the placement of the antenna on this quad is the reason for actually more breakup on the way out. Probably the reason for more breakup on the way in, I mean, than on the way out. Because obviously when you're tilting the quad, the antenna is either in a good place or not a very good place. And I think on the way back, because we're not going at much speed here, the antenna's not getting much clearance. So range test wise, I don't want to take it any further than that because I want to stay in the confines of this field. But yeah, as I said, just break up on the way back really. Okay, so now the range test with the Dock King. Let's do exactly the same route as we went before. Now, you remember that the first test, we had no breakup on the way out, but we did get breakup on the way back, interestingly, and I think that's because of antenna placement on this certain quad. This quad, by the way, is the Dart Max, one of my favorites. Anyway, so I'm going to get to the end of the field again. I don't want to go any further. I want to stay in the confines of this field. But again, perfect signal all the way out, not a single bit of breakup. So I'm going to turn around at this point, and this is where we started to get breakup. before on the earlier test, as you remember. So far, okay, little bit there, but certainly nowhere near as much breakup as we had before. Let's do a little roll, because we can. No breakup there whatsoever. And again, the antenna placement is not efficient for the direction that I'm facing in right now on the way back. So that is a really good test. So I think probably having its own dedicated battery in the Dock King means that the module has uninterrupted power supply. Whereas of course, when you've got the battery connected to the goggles, not only is that battery powering the goggles, but it's also powering the module. So I think that might be the reason for that better signal. Now I'm actually behind the Dock King right now. And look at this signal. It's just beautiful. And remember that, you know, we're only now on the omnidirectional because I'm behind the Dock King. We're only on 25 milliwatts as well. And yet it's just immaculate signal. So penetration into the trees during that tree test wasn't as significant as this test now, which is showing just how good, there we are, just how good the signal is when the receiver has its own dedicated power supply. And I mean, I am really impressed, really impressed. It does look nice, doesn't it, with that tripod as well. Oh yeah. So overall, Dock King, what would I say? Well, I think the convenience of not having to worry about where your head is pointing is a massive win, massive, massive win. That coupled with the fact that clearly during this test here, we're getting better signal in general. And it might be my imagination, but I think the picture's better as well. It's cheap as well, it's not that expensive at all. And you know, for someone like me, someone who's very new to FPV, if I can see the benefits of this, then I'm sure that someone that knows what they're doing can definitely see the benefits of it. So in conclusion, good work, FuriousFPV. This is a great module for people to enjoy this brilliant hobby even more. Be sure to comment below with your thoughts and give the video a thumbs up, and thanks very much for subscribing. Cheers guys.